Chronicle of Operation Web, the first battle of a new era. June 1st, 2025, 6:12 a.m. Moscow time. Murmansk region, entrance to the town of Olenegorsk. A narrow road, tightly squeezed by dense forest, leads toward the outskirts of Olenegorsk, a town where, behind barbed wire, lies one of the most heavily guarded air bases in Russia, Olenya. This is where the Tu-95 strategic bombers are stationed, a key component of Russia's nuclear triad. Near a small gas station at the town's entrance, a truck is parked. The driver had been told the day before, "Wait here. The client will arrive in the morning to receive the cargo." He doesn't know that inside his trailer isn't the prefabricated house listed in the manifest. At 6:12, something begins that could be mistaken for a scene from a sci-fi action movie or a high-budget video game. The truck's tarp-covered roof suddenly tears open, and from the opening, drones begin launching one by one into the air. This marks the beginning of Ukraine's Operation Web, an operation that may very well redefine the very nature of modern warfare. Russia takes great pride in its nuclear triad. Ground-based intercontinental ballistic missiles such as Voyevoda RS-20, Yars RS-24, and Sarmat RS-28. Nuclear-powered ballistic missile submarines like the Barai class, Project 955, and the older Delta IV class, Project 667 BDRM, both carrying nuclear-armed missiles, and long-range strategic aviation bombers like the Tu-95MS, Tu-160, and Tu-22M3. For the Russian leadership, this triad is something close to sacred, a symbol of ultimate security and geopolitical influence. In its official nuclear doctrine, the Kremlin has clearly stated that an attack on any component of the triad gives Russia the right to launch a nuclear strike. To Putin, this seemed to secure his sacred grail beyond all threats. But Ukraine saw things differently and delivered a staggering blow. The drones launched from the truck skim just above the treetops of the northern dwarf pines as they head straight toward Olenya airfield. Speed 50 meters per second, roughly 112 miles per hour. According to the Russian General Staff's own calculations, the attackers stood virtually no chance of success. But was that really true? Each drone transmits a live video feed through Russia's own mobile network. The operators sitting hundreds of miles away in Ukraine watch the live stream on their monitors. They see every fence post, every antenna, every hangar detail as if they were driving the drones themselves. The base is protected by a layered air defense system. The first tier consists of specialized search radars, specifically the Nebo-M radar system. It can detect small targets using long wavelengths that resonate with drone-sized objects. However, the system has a critical vulnerability: positional accuracy. With its current configuration, the beam width spans several hundred meters, which means it can detect the presence of a target, but cannot guide a missile accurately to intercept it. Because of this, the drones pass right by the radar unnoticed and unharmed. The second tier is the S-400 Triumph system, the crown jewel of Russia's air defense. It boasts a striking range of up to 250 kilometers, or about 155 miles. Its main battle radar, the 92N6E, known by NATO as Gravestone, can simultaneously track up to 300 targets. Its long-range surveillance radar, the 91N6E, Big Bird in NATO terms, can scan airspace up to 400 kilometers away, or 250 miles. The 48N6E3 interceptor missiles of the Triumph system can soar to altitudes of 30 kilometers, or over 15 miles. But what followed resembled a modern retelling of the David and Goliath story. The entire might of the Gravestone radar was designed for high-altitude threats, fighter jets, cruise missiles, hypersonic glide vehicles. An FPV drone is a completely different kind of target. Its radar cross-section is minimal, under 0.1 square meters, or roughly 1 square foot. Its flight altitude is around 90 meters, or 300 feet. At that height, the radar horizon for a ground-based system is about 40 to 50 kilometers, or 25 to 30 miles. But there's a catch. At such low altitudes and with such a small target size, the radar signal gets drowned in reflections from the ground, forest, and surrounding buildings. This phenomenon is known as ground clutter. In practice, the drones only enter the radar's reliable detection zone when they're within 5 to 6 kilometers, or about 3 miles from the base. In other words, right after they lift off from the truck. At first glance, the operation still seems doomed. The S-400's minimum engagement range is 2 to 5 kilometers, 1 to 3 miles, for its heavy missiles, and about 1 kilometer or just over half a mile for lighter ones. The math is simple, but there's a deeper logic at play. Firing missiles that cost nearly $1 million each at drones worth about $500 is not a particularly efficient strategy. Yes, Russia isn't exactly counting pennies here, and behind the S-400 stand aircraft worth close to $100 million. Still, no launch order was given. Maybe there was no written protocol for such a case, and we know how slow military bureaucracies can be, whether in the Pentagon or the Russian General Staff. Even though drones have become a mainstay of the war in Ukraine for over 2 years, many of the top brass still think in yesterday's terms. Or maybe the explanation is even simpler. The S-400's minimum range really was too long. No one expected the Ukrainians to actually test it. Meanwhile, Ukrainian drone operators now had a clear visual of the distinct octagonal radar array of the gravestone. What the S-400 couldn't handle was supposed to be covered by the close-range defense tier, namely the Pantsir S-1 systems. In theory, the Pantsir's radar can detect a target with a radar cross-section of 2 square meters or about 20 square feet at a range of up to 36 kilometers or 22 miles. But at an altitude of just 90 meters, that detection envelope shrinks drastically to 10 or 15 kilometers, 6 to 9 miles, and even less in the uneven terrain of the tundra. When the drones crossed the 6-kilometer line from the base's perimeter, the Pantsir systems finally picked them up as actual targets. That left less than 2 minutes to intercept. In ideal conditions, that might have been enough, but Ukraine offered no ideal conditions. The drones flew in a tight swarm, periodically shifting formations. The tracking algorithms of the Pantsir system started to glitch. Every change in formation required recalculating targeting priorities, intercept angles, and missile trajectories over and over again. The overloaded fire control computers began looping, struggling to decide which target to strike first, which flight path to select, and how to time and coordinate launches. A few missiles were fired, but even the highly maneuverable 576 surface-to-air missiles lacked the time they needed. At such close range, they couldn't stabilize their trajectories quickly enough, and their proximity fuses didn't have time to activate. That left only the guns. The twin 30mm autocannons of the Pantsir began spraying the sky in a dense barrage, but that wasn't precise enough to stop small, agile drones. A few were shot down. Most got through. 6:14 a.m. Moscow time. The first wave of drones breaches the perimeter of Olenya Air Base. The massacre begins. Some drones slam into radar antenna arrays, sending out showers of sparks and cutting power supplies. Others strike hangars and fuel depots. Most head straight for the parked Tu-95 bombers, left exposed on the tarmac. The breach was a success. But Operation Web didn't end there. That was only the first stage. And there wasn't just a second or third stage either. June 1st, 2025, 6:25 a.m. Moscow time. Central Russia, Ryazan region. Dyagilivo Air Base. Following the strike on Olenya, the operation continued with surgical precision. Several kilometers from Dyagilivo, a semi-truck had quietly been parked on the side of a suburban road. The driver was given the same standard instructions. Pull over, wait for the client. The cargo will be received in the morning. Just like his counterpart in Olenegorsk, the driver had no idea that inside his trailer was a mobile launch system. At 6:25 a.m., the truck's tarp split open. Another wave of Ukrainian FPV drones launched into the sky, altitude 90 meters, distance to the airbase just 5 or 6 kilometers. Just like in the north, the drones were being controlled remotely from Ukraine. The operators were hundreds of kilometers away from Ryazan, piloting their machines via Russia's civilian mobile network. Each drone connected to a secure command channel through standard 4G modules. Russian cell towers had unknowingly become the communication backbone of this strike. The operator saw everything through their drone's eyes. On their screens, the perimeter of the airbase, hangars, concrete pads, power lines, fences. In real time, they guided each drone precisely to its designated target. Waiting for them were several battalions of S-400s with overlapping targeting zones. Pantsir S-1 systems guarded the inner perimeter, and the electronic warfare complexes Krashuka 4 and Kupol were jamming the full radio frequency spectrum. On paper, the base looked impenetrable, but the drones deployed a new tactic. They didn't approach as a dense swarm. The formation broke into 7 mini-groups of 4 to 5 drones each, approaching from different directions, altitudes, and with staggered timing. This wasn't chaotic movement, it was a mathematically crafted overload scenario designed to cripple air defense logic. Failure started immediately. Each Panzer could track 4 targets simultaneously. One S-400 battalion could handle up to 12. On paper, that was enough. But as drone groups repeatedly split and reformed, the fire control computers were forced to recalculate priorities, tracking angles, and predicted flight paths over and over again. These frequent synchronized changes disrupted the air defense algorithms. The system began to lag, caught in feedback loops. While defenses locked onto one group, another slipped closer than anticipated. Every new split introduced a delay of about 12 seconds in trajectory recalculations, just enough time for a drone to cover 600 meters. The algorithms fell out of rhythm. The swarm entered what's known as an internal loop mode, where attackers move faster than defenders can respond. Russia's electronic warfare systems operated at full capacity. The jamming wall blanketed entire frequency bands, but the drones were equipped with adaptive frequency hopping networks up to 1,000 switches per second. The Russian jammers couldn't keep up. 6:31 a.m. Moscow time. The synchronized strike began. 17 drones hit their targets almost simultaneously, with intervals of just 1 or 2 seconds. They carried shaped charge and fragmentation payloads. The aircraft on the tarmac burst into flames. 6:34 a.m. Dyagilevo was burning. Out of 31 drones, 8 were shot down. The rest fulfilled their mission. Several bombers were disabled. A strike on this deep strategic base marked the second major blow to Russia's air defense network that morning. But that was only the second phase. June 1st, 2025, 6:42 a.m. Central Russia. Ivanovo-Severny Air Base. Following the strikes on Olenya and Dyagilevo, Operation Web shifted to an even more advanced technological level. The next target was Ivanovo, a critical base for Russia's long-range aviation and, more importantly, home to the A-50 airborne early warning and control aircraft. The A-50s are Russia's eyes, providing long-range radar coverage and coordinating the nation's air and missile defense systems. Losing even one of them would create a devastating gap in Russia's aerial command infrastructure. The launch was once again executed with practiced precision. A day earlier, a semi-truck had quietly been parked on a roadside near the base. The driver was given the same familiar instructions. Pull over, wait, the client will arrive in the morning. At 6:42 a.m. Moscow time, the truck began releasing drones. Altitude again 90 meters, distance to the airbase about 5 kilometers. The conditions were perfect for a rapid, targeted strike. The primary goal was to destroy the A-50s. Their distinctive radar domes mounted atop their fuselages made them easy to identify. The swarm again moved with cold logic, designed to overwhelm the tracking systems of Russia's air defenses. 6:47 a.m. The first drone hit the radar dome of one A-50. Seconds later, another drone delivered a knockout blow to a second A-50. Losing just one of these aircraft meant a critical breakdown in the coordination of long-range air defenses across the entire eastern zone. By 6:50, Ivanovo-Severny was blanketed in smoke. But this was only the third stage of Operation Web. June 1st, 2025, 7:10 a.m. Moscow time. Eastern Siberia, Krasnoyarsk-a, Belaya Air Base. Operation Web now spanned nearly the entire territory of Russia. The next target was Belaya, a strategic air base in Krasnoyarsk-a. It was from here that Tu-95 bombers routinely launched missions across the North Pole into distant patrol zones. The launch scenario was familiar: an ordinary semi-truck pre-positioned on the side of a rural road 5 to 6 kilometers from the base. The driver, just like in previous cases, had been given the same instruction: pull over, wait, the client will arrive in the morning. But this time something unexpected happened. Local long-haul drivers, witnessing drones taking off from the trailer, reacted on instinct. They didn't yet know the details of the operation, but they sensed it was an attack on Russia, and they tried to stop it. Someone threw dirt and rocks into the open trailer. Others fired at the truck's roof with hunting rifles. In some small way, their response helped protect the airfield. Only a few drones reached the fuel tanks on the service pad. No direct hits on aircraft were recorded. Behind this almost surreal strike, in both audacity and scale, stood cold, calculated logistics. Thousands of kilometers from the front lines in the Ural industrial hub of Chelyabinsk, the operation had been assembled. In a nondescript warehouse complex on the city's outskirts, the drones were built and armed. In massive hangars, automated launch systems were installed in the truck trailers. Batteries were loaded, warheads mounted, control links tested. Officially, the cargo was listed as prefabricated homes or construction modules. That's how it appeared on the paperwork. Drivers received their routes, stop coordinates, and arrival times. Everything else had been pre-programmed. And then, in the early hours of June 1st, one by one, the trucks opened from Olenegorsk to Siberia, and the skies over Russia filled with buzzing specks, each one a symbol of a new world and a new kind of war. Let's look at the results. According to Pentagon estimates, around 20 aircraft were hit, with approximately 10 completely destroyed. Ukrainian sources claimed 41 aircraft were struck, with at least 13 confirmed destroyed. The Washington Post, analyzing satellite imagery and video footage, verified no fewer than 13 damaged planes. One way or another, June 1st, 2025 will be remembered as a turning point in modern history. 4 Russian strategic bases, 4 precision strikes, hundreds of drones, each weighing only a few kilograms. Simple, brushless motors, basic electronics, components that, until recently, could be bought at a hardware store. And yet, this became a weapon capable of breaking through even the most advanced air defense systems. Not hypersonic missiles, not 5th-generation stealth bombers, not a satellite constellation. June 1st, 2025 marked the moment the old rules of war began to collapse. Thank you for watching. We'd appreciate your like and subscription. See you again soon.